relationship that I had shut down for years. It wasn't until I came home from college for the first time after my freshman year that I started to see Mark in a new light. I had been away for months, living in a dorm, doing things for myself, making friends, experiencing the world outside of Maplewood, and when I came back home, I felt different, like I had changed, grown in a way I hadn't expected. I'd become more independent, more self-assured. That weekend, I was spending some time in the living room, catching up on reading, when Mark came in with a tray of coffee and pastries. He set it down on the table in front of me, smiling warmly. It was a small gesture, something you would expect from any parent, but there was something in the way he looked at me that felt different. "How's college been treating you?" he asked, settling down beside me on the couch. There was no tension in his voice, just an openness that felt foreign, like he was really seeing me for the first time. "It's good, busy, you know, but I like it," I replied, glancing at him with a smile. Mark's eyes softened. "I'm proud of you, Leah. You've come a long way from the shy girl who used to sit in the back of the room. I don't think I ever told you that, but I've always been proud of how you've grown." I froze. I wasn't used to hearing Mark say anything like that. My mom had always been the one to express her pride, her love, but Mark, he had always been distant, careful, always a little removed. To hear him speak those words so gently made something stir in my chest. I had always thought he saw me as just a stepdaughter, a secondary character in his life. But now it felt like he was seeing me for who I truly was. And then there was the look in his eyes. It was subtle at first, just a flicker, something I couldn't quite place. He had always been stoic. That in that moment, there was something in his gaze that was different. Something softer, warmer, but also more intense than I had ever seen before. My heart skipped a beat. I felt exposed somehow, like I was standing in front of him for the first time. I quickly looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. I didn't know how to process what was happening. Was I reading too much into it? Was I imagining the shift in our dynamic? I didn't know. Over the next few weeks, things between Mark and me seemed to change in small ways. He started giving me longer, lingering looks when we'd have conversations. He'd smile at me with an intensity that I wasn't used to, one that made me feel both seen and vulnerable. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe it was just the distance I'd felt over the years coming into sharper focus. But as time went on, it became harder to deny that something was off. Something was different in the way he looked at me, in the way he acted. The line between fatherly affection and something else seemed to blur, and I didn't know how to handle it. Every time I caught him watching me, his gaze a little too soft, a little too lingering, I felt a sense of unease I couldn't shake, and the more I tried to ignore it, the more it seemed to build between us, a quiet tension that neither of us was willing to acknowledge. It wasn't just about what was happening in the present. It was about everything that had led up to this point, the subtle shifts, the way he had raised me, the way his eyes lingered on me now. His words from the past, the care, the concern suddenly felt loaded. I wasn't sure what to make of it. I wasn't sure what any of it meant. But I knew one thing: Mark, the man who had raised me, was no longer the stranger I thought he was, and that terrified me. The next few weeks were filled with uncertainty. I couldn't stop thinking about the way Mark had looked at me, the weight of his words, and the lingering feeling that something between us had shifted in ways I wasn't prepared for. I'd never felt so unsettled in my own home, in my own family. What had started as a small, fleeting moment had slowly become an ever-present discomfort, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was hiding something from me, or worse, that I was afraid to confront what I was beginning to suspect. I tried to go about my days as if everything was normal. I focused on work, spent time with my mom, caught up on school assignments that I'd let slip while I was home. But it was impossible to ignore the undercurrent of tension. Whenever Mark and I were in the same room, it wasn't just the subtle glances that made my skin prickle. It was the way he seemed to be everywhere I was. He started asking questions that went beyond the usual small talk. "How's your roommate? How's your boyfriend? Are you eating enough?" It wasn't that I didn't appreciate his concern, but it felt off, like he was trying too hard. Like he was walking on eggshells around me. And it didn't help that I had a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. A feeling I couldn't ignore. Every time he looked at me, I felt as though I was seeing a side of him. I wasn't meant to see something hidden beneath the surface of his calm, fatherly demeanor. He was no longer just my stepfather. There was a depth to the way he was acting now, something more intense, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face it. I spent long nights in my room, the weight of my thoughts pressing down on me. Was I overreacting? Was I just reading too much into his actions? But every time I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, my mind would return to that moment on the couch. The way his hand brushed against mine, the softness in his eyes that felt foreign. I couldn't ignore the way it made me feel both uncomfortable and strangely captivated. One evening about a month after that initial conversation, Mark invited me to go with him to a local car show. He had been restoring a classic car for months and wanted to show it off. At first, I wasn't interested. I didn't particularly care about cars, and the thought of spending more time with him in such an intimate setting made me uneasy, but he asked so casually, almost as though he expected me to say yes, and I couldn't bring myself to turn him down. "Come on, Leah," he said one morning while I was in the kitchen. "It'll be good for you to get out and do something different. Plus, it's just you and me. It'll be fun." The way he said it felt too natural, like it was no big deal, but the more he said it, the more I realized that it was a big deal. We had never spent time alone like that before. Not outside the confines of our home. The idea of being out in public alone with him sent a wave of unease through me, but I agreed anyway. Maybe it would help clear the air between us. Or maybe I was just afraid to say no. I didn't want to be rude or hurt his feelings. I still wasn't sure how to navigate what was happening between us. The day of the car show arrived, and I found myself sitting in the passenger seat of Mark's car, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and dread. As we made our way through the crowded lot, the sun beating down, Mark chatted about the restoration work on his car, but I found it hard to focus on anything he said. My thoughts kept drifting back to that moment on the couch, the way he had looked at me, the way my own body had responded. It was as though his presence was filling the space between us in a way that was impossible to ignore. When we arrived at the car show, Mark immediately walked toward a group of people he knew, leaving me alone by the cars. I stood there, awkwardly, watching him talk to the other men about engines and horsepower, but I couldn't focus. All I could think about was the way his hand had brushed mine just a few weeks ago, and how even now, I could feel the lingering warmth of that touch. The thought made my heart race. I wandered away from the crowd trying to distract myself with the cars around me, but I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. I looked around and saw Mark standing across the lot, his eyes locked on me. For a moment, it felt like everything stopped. His gaze was intense, more intense than I'd ever seen it before, and I could feel it like a weight on my chest. There was something dangerous in the way he was looking at me. Something unsettling. He wasn't just admiring the cars. He was watching me. I quickly turned away, trying to shake the feeling that had settled into my bones, but I knew it was real. Mark was no longer just a father figure in my life. He had crossed a line that I wasn't ready to acknowledge. And the more I tried to deny it, the more I realized that I couldn't run from it. As the day wore on, I tried to keep my distance. I made excuses to walk around, to check out other cars, to stay out of his line of sight. But I knew I couldn't escape the truth forever. What was happening between us wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was something deeper, something darker, and I was too afraid to face it head on. Later that evening, after the car show had wrapped up, Mark and I drove home in silence. The tension between us was palpable, and I couldn't bear to look at him. When we finally arrived, he turned to me, as I was about to get out of the car. "Leah," he said, his voice low. "I just want you to know that I care about you, okay? More than you think." I froze, my hand on the car door. There it was again. Those words, that intensity. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him to stop, to put distance between us, but I didn't. I couldn't. All I could do was nod, too afraid to speak. "I'm going to go inside," I said quietly. And before he could respond, I stepped out of the car and walked into the house, my heart pounding. The door closed behind. But the silence in the air still felt suffocating. I couldn't escape it. What had been a distant discomfort had now turned into something I couldn't ignore. Mark had crossed a line, and I was trapped in the middle of it, unsure of what to do next. But one thing was certain.